I wasn't planning on eavesdropping, really. But when the guy next to me on the bus suddenly started arguing on the phone in that way that pulls you in, the voice raised just enough, the frustration bleeding through like a live wire. I found myself listening. What caught me off guard wasn't the fight, though. It was what he said right after, a sudden shift from anger to something softer. He glanced over at me, phone still pressed to his ear, and asked, out of nowhere, "Hey man, do you believe in love?" I'm not sure why I looked up instead of pretending to scroll through my phone. Maybe it was the way he asked, like he was looking for a real answer, not just making small talk. Or maybe it was just the way his voice cracked a little at the end, like he wasn't so sure about the answer himself. Either way, I met his eyes, and before I could say anything, he ended the call. That moment, on this crowded, rattling city bus, felt like a scene from a movie I wasn't expecting to be in. He sat down next to me afterward, pushing his headphones into his pocket with a sigh that sounded like he'd been holding it in all day. The guy looked like he could have been a model. Tall, messy, dark hair that looked like he ran his hands through it one too many times, and eyes that were sharp but tired. I'm Jake, by the way, and normally I'm the guy who mindlessly scrolls through my phone on public transport, trying to avoid eye contact. But there's something about this guy, about that question he asked, that made me want to say more than just yeah or no. I ended up telling him that I think love is real, but it's messy and complicated, and sometimes you don't even know what it looks like until it's right in front of you. He chuckled, a half smile breaking through, like he was surprised someone actually answered honestly. Messy and complicated, he repeated, like he was testing the words out loud. I think that's the best way to put it. We talked for the rest of the ride, about everything and nothing, about city life, bad dates, and why it's so hard to find something real. I learned his name's Eli, and that he just moved here a few months ago for work. He had this way of talking that made it easy to forget the noise of the bus and the people around us. By the time we got off, I wanted to ask for his number, but something held me back. Like maybe this was one of those moments that stays a bit mysterious. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted that day. Like the question about love was the start of something I didn't know I was ready for. And honestly, I'm still wondering what he meant when he asked if I believed in love. Because after that phone call and that look he gave me, I'm not sure I'm asking the right question anymore. I spent the rest of the day replaying that conversation in my head like it was some kind of loop I couldn't turn off. I kept wondering what Eli's story was. What had him so worked up on the phone that he'd suddenly switch gears and ask a stranger if he believed in love? There was something raw in that moment, the kind of honesty you don't stumble into every day. The next morning, I caught myself hoping I'd see him again on my usual bus. No such luck. I scanned every seat when I boarded, but no sign of Eli. I told myself it was just one of those strange city moments. People come and go, and sometimes you cross paths for a brief second, and that's it. Still, I felt this odd pull, like the universe had dropped something in my lap, and I wasn't quite done with it yet. A few days passed, and then one afternoon, as I was headed home from work, there he was again. Eli was sitting on the bench outside the coffee shop I pass every day, earbuds in, looking down at his phone like he was trying to disappear into it. I'd always been a little shy about starting conversations with strangers, but this time, something was different. I took a deep breath and walked over. "Hey," I said, a little awkwardly. He looked up, startled. Then his face relaxed into that same half smile. "Hey, Jake, right?" I blinked. "Yeah. How'd you? You mentioned my name yesterday. Made it easier to remember yours." That cracked the tension a bit. We ended up sitting together, sharing a coffee that I offered after Eli insisted he was broke and needed a pick-me-up. The cafe was warm and smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon, a cozy contrast to the gray drizzle outside. We talked about work. He's in graphic design, freelancing mostly, and still trying to find steady clients. I worked in marketing, which was a whole different kind of chaos, but had its own perks. It wasn't like a first date or anything. No flirting, really. Just two guys talking like old friends who finally caught up after years apart. But beneath the surface, I could feel that question hanging there between us. Love. What it meant. If it was real. if we were even capable of it. So Eli said after a while, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly, "Why do you think love's messy and complicated?" I shrugged, struggling to put it into words. Because it's not like in the movies. It's not some perfect thing that just falls into place. It's arguments, misunderstandings, people getting hurt, sometimes unintentionally. You have to work for it, and sometimes, even when you do, it still doesn't work out. Eli nodded slowly. Yeah, I was just on the phone with my ex. We were arguing about something stupid, but it brought up all those feelings again. Makes you question if you're fooling yourself, you know? I stared at him, surprised by the raw honesty. Do you want to get back together? He looked away before he answered, voice quieter. I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just scared of being alone. I guess that's why I asked you if you believed in love. I'm trying to figure out if it's worth all the pain. That hit me harder than I expected. I reached out and rested my hand on his for a second. Just a normal, gentle touch. But it felt important. I think it's worth it, I said. Even when it's hard. Eli looked at me, that tired but hopeful look in his eyes. What if it's never easy? I smiled. Then maybe we find someone who makes the hard parts feel a little less hard. We sat there for a while, the hum of the cafe around us, and I realized I didn't want to let this moment slip away. So when Eli glanced at his watch and sighed, I took a chance. Do you want to hang out again? Like, not just on the bus or at random coffee shops? He smiled a little wider. Yeah, I think I'd like that. Walking home that evening, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't sure where things were headed with Eli. Hell, I barely knew him, but for the first time in a long time, I felt something more than just passing curiosity. It was hope. Maybe love really was messy and complicated, but maybe it was also worth chasing. I didn't know then if this was going to turn into something big, or just a fleeting connection. But for once, I was okay with not having all the answers. Because sometimes, the best stories start with a question you didn't see coming, and a guy who's willing to ask it. The next few weeks were, well, unexpectedly good. I mean, I guess I wasn't really prepared for how much I'd look forward to seeing Eli after that day at the coffee shop. We started texting more, sometimes late into the night, sharing random thoughts, memes, and the occasional deep conversation when one of us was feeling brave. One Friday, he invited me to this tiny art show he was part of downtown. It wasn't anything fancy, just some local artists showcasing their work in an old warehouse-turned-gallery. I had no idea Eli was into art like that. His designs were mostly digital, but seeing his photography prints on the wall was a whole other level. There was this black and white shot of a crowded street, rain pouring down, people with umbrellas, but none of them making eye contact. I caught Eli watching me as I stood there, and he said, "That one's my favorite. Feels like the city's lonely, even when it's full of people." I nodded, understanding that feeling more than I wanted to admit. Kinda like us, huh? Meeting on a bus, feeling invisible to everyone else. He smiled softly. Yeah. After the show, we wandered through the city streets. The night air cool, but not cold. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement from an earlier rain, making everything look kind of dreamy. We talked about everything, our families, what we wanted from life, the awkwardness of dating apps. I found myself opening up more than I usually do, and he did too. At one point, Eli stopped in front of a small park, benches empty, and the usual bustle replaced by a calm silence. He looked at me, eyes searching. Can I ask you something personal? I shrugged. Shoot. Have you ever been heartbroken? Like, really broken? I thought about it. There had been relationships before, some that ended amicably, others that left scars I didn't like to revisit. Yeah, more than once. But I think the worst part is not the breaking. It's the waiting for the pieces to fit back together. Sometimes they don't. He nodded slowly, like he was storing that away. Me too. I guess that's why it's hard to believe in love sometimes. Because the pain sticks around. We stood there for a moment, the silence between us comfortable but heavy with unspoken things. Then, almost as if he was deciding something right then, Eli reached out and took my hand. It wasn't a sweeping romantic gesture or anything dramatic. It was quiet and steady, like he was grounding himself. I didn't pull away. Instead, I squeezed his hand gently, and the world felt a little less lonely in that instant. A few days later, we found ourselves back on the bus, sitting side by side like we had that first day. It was quieter now. The awkwardness melted away into something warmer. Eli pulled out his phone and showed me a playlist he'd made, songs that somehow matched the mood of those messy, complicated feelings we'd been talking about. Music helps, he said. It's like a safe place when everything else is chaos. I agreed. Yeah, it's like it understands the parts of us we don't say out loud. That's when he surprised me again. Can I ask you something else? More challenging. I raised an eyebrow, smiling. You're full of surprises today. Okay, he said, hesitating. What if we tried this? What if we tried to be something real? Not just whatever this casual thing is. I'm tired of pretending I don't want something more. My heart skipped. I'd been wondering the same thing but was scared to say it out loud. I want that too, I admitted. But it's scary. What if we mess it up? Eli laughed, a little shaky. Isn't that the whole point? To risk the mess for the chance at something real? I looked at him, so genuine and vulnerable, and something inside me shifted. Let's try then, mess and all. From that day on, we started carving out time for each other. Dinner dates, walks through parks, lazy afternoons binge-watching shows. We weren't perfect, far from it. There were moments of doubt, misunderstandings, and the inevitable awkwardness of figuring out how to be with someone again after past hurts. But there was also laughter, shared secrets, and that feeling of finding a safe harbor in the storm. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I found myself at Eli's apartment, sprawled on the couch with a bottle of cheap wine and a playlist of songs that somehow spoke for both of us. We talked about the future, about fears, about what love might look like if we let it in. I still wonder if it's all just a chance, Eli said quietly. If we're lucky or just fooling ourselves. I reached out, tucking a stray lock of hair behind his ear. Maybe it's both, but I don't want to miss out on this because I'm too scared. He smiled, eyes bright with something I hadn't seen before. Hope. And for the first time in a long time, I believed in that messy, complicated, terrifying thing called love. We settled into a rhythm after that night, one that felt both familiar and new. Eli wasn't just the guy that first met on the bus anymore. He was the person I texted first thing in the morning, the one I sent dumb memes to at random, the guy the first could talk to about anything without feeling judged. It was strange and wonderful, like discovering a new favorite song that suddenly made every other tune you'd heard before seem flat. But, as with most things worth having, it wasn't all smooth sailing. A few weeks in, the cracks started showing. Nothing huge, just those little moments when past fears sneaked in like uninvited guests. One night, for example, we were supposed to meet for dinner. I got caught up at work and sent him a quick text explaining I'd be late. What I didn't realize was that he'd already been waiting, checking his phone every few minutes, feeling like he'd been stood up. When I finally showed up, a little breathless and apologetic, Eli was sitting outside the restaurant, arms crossed, looking tired and a bit hurt. That look hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just about the delay. It was the accumulation of all the little fears and insecurities neither of us had dared to fully admit. It's hard sometimes, he said quietly, not looking at me. Feels like I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop. I sat beside him, trying to find the right words. I get that. I think I'm scared too, of messing this up, of losing something that feels real. He finally looked at me, eyes searching. Do you think we can make it through the messy parts? I nodded without hesitation. I want to try, even if it's hard. That night was one of our first real tests, and maybe that's when I started understanding just how complicated love could be. It required patience, understanding, and a willingness to be vulnerable, even when it scared you. There was a moment a few days later when we were sitting in Eli's living room, the city lights filtering through the window, and he brought up something that caught me off guard. Do you ever wonder if maybe we're just chasing an idea of love? Like, not the actual thing, but our own version of it? I thought about that for a second. Yeah, I think that's inevitable. We all have these expectations from movies, books, past relationships, but maybe the real thing is just the messy, imperfect connection we build together. Not a perfect story, but a real one. He smiled, a little relieved. That makes sense. One evening, we went for a walk along the river. The air was crisp, and the city lights shimmered on the water. We talked about the future, scary conversations about what we wanted, what we hoped for. Eli admitted he'd been hesitant to fully open up before because of past hurts. I shared my own fears about commitment. I'm scared to lose myself if I give in too much, I confessed. He squeezed my hand. I think love should make you feel found, not lost. That stuck with me. It was a reminder that love wasn't about losing who you are, but finding someone who sees you, all of you, and still wants to be there. Around that time, Eli invited me to meet some of his friends. I was nervous. Meeting the people who mattered to someone you care about always feels like a big deal. But his friends were warm and welcoming, teasing him in that friendly way only long-time friends can, and including me effortlessly. Watching Eli relax and laugh with them made me feel like I was getting a glimpse of his world beyond just the two of us. Then came a weekend trip we impulsively planned. A couple of days out of the city. Just the two of us. We rented a small cabin by a lake, away from the noise and distractions. It was the first time we really had to just be with each other, without the usual hum of daily life. Those days were a mix of quiet moments and bursts of laughter. We cooked meals together, walked through the woods, and sat by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. I remember one night, sitting wrapped in a blanket, Eli resting his head on my shoulder, whispering that he'd never felt this connected to anyone before. It was the kind of moment that makes you believe in love, not the grand declarations or perfect days, but the simple act of being present, of choosing each other over and over. But just as things felt like they were settling into something solid, life threw us a curveball. Eli got news about a big project overseas, a job opportunity that was hard to say no to, but meant he'd be gone for months. We spent hours talking about what it might mean for us, for the future we were starting to imagine. I don't want to lose what we have, he said, voice thick with emotion. But I also don't want to hold you back. I don't want you to hold back either, I told him. We'll figure it out. Distance is tough, but it's not impossible. Still, the uncertainty crept in, that familiar fear of losing what felt fragile but precious. In that moment, I realized that believing in love wasn't just about the good times or the sparks. It was about facing the unknown together, about trusting even when it feels risky. And as scary as it was, I knew I wanted to take that leap with Eli, so we made a promise, not about forever, but about showing up for each other, no matter what. Because sometimes, love isn't about having all the answers. It's about being brave enough to keep asking the questions and choosing each other anyway. The days after Eli's news felt like walking on a tightrope. We were both holding on to each other, but the tension was there. Quiet, persistent, like the ticking of a clock you can't ignore. Packing his bags was harder than I thought it would be. I kept staring at his suitcase, half packed with clothes and sketchbooks, wondering how the hell we were supposed to make this work. The night before he left, we barely spoke. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't sound like cliches or empty promises. Instead, we just sat on his couch, close but not touching, watching the city lights flicker outside the window. Finally, Eli broke the silence. This please mess, doesn't it? I forced a laugh. Yeah, you could say that again. He turned to me, eyes searching. I don't want this to be the end for us. Me neither. But sometimes, love isn't about what you want. It's about what the world throws at you and how you handle it. That night, when he finally kissed me goodbye, it felt like more than just a kiss. It was a promise wrapped in uncertainty, a fragile link holding us together despite the miles that would come between us. The first week apart was rougher than I expected. Our texts were constant at first. Good mornings, good nights, little jokes to keep the mood light, but then reality kicked in. Time zones, work, and exhaustion started to chip away at the frequency. Calls got shorter, messages slower. I found myself staring at my phone, wondering if I was bothering him. One night, I caught myself scrolling through his Instagram, looking for any sign that he was thinking about me too. There was a photo of a sunset over the city where he was the kind of view that made me wish I was there with him. I texted him, "That looks amazing. Wish we could watch it together." His reply took hours. Me too. It was short, but enough to keep me hopeful. A month in, we scheduled a video call. Seeing Eli's face lit up by the screen was like a breath of fresh air. We talked about his new job, the strange food he was eating, and how much he missed home. But under the surface, there was something unsaid. The distance was wearing on both of us. Eli sighed and said, "It's harder than I thought. I didn't realize how much I'd missed the little things." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Me too. That call ended with a promise to try harder, but I could feel the cracks widening. One evening, I woke up to a message from Eli that was different. Cold, distant. "I think we need to talk." It read. My heart sank. We arranged a call for the next day. When we connected, his face was tense, eyes tired. "I've been thinking." He started, voice low. "Maybe this distance is telling us something. Maybe we rushed into this because we were scared of being alone." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't want to give up on us." "I don't either," he said quickly. "But I don't want us to hurt each other more by holding on to something that's breaking." The conversation was painful but honest. We both admitted our fears of losing each other, of losing ourselves. We agreed to take a step back, to give ourselves space to figure out what we really wanted. Sitting alone that night, I realized love wasn't just the butterflies or the easy laughs. It was also this, the difficult conversations, the letting go, and the hope that maybe, somehow, the messy, complicated thing could survive. Weeks passed. We didn't talk much, but every so often, a message would slip through. "Thinking of you. Hope you're okay." Those small notes were lifelines. Then, out of the blue, Eli sent me a flight number. "I'm coming home." I blinked, heart pounding. He landed the next day, looking tired but smiling when he saw me at the airport. Without a word, we fell into each other's arms, the months of distance melting away. That night, we sat on his couch, holding hands, the city alive outside. "I don't have all the answers," he said softly. "Neither do I replied. "But I want to figure it out. With you." And in that moment, I believed it was possible, that love, with all its messiness and pain, was still worth it. Because sometimes, the best kind of love is the one that fights to stay alive, no matter what. After Eli got back, things felt different. Like the air between us was charged with this quiet intensity, a mix of relief and a new kind of vulnerability. We weren't just two guys trying to hold on to something long distance anymore. We were two guys trying to rebuild something that had been tested and stretched but refused to break. Those first few days, we didn't say much about the months apart. Instead, we did the easy things, cooked dinner together, watched dumb TV shows, took long walks through the neighborhood. I noticed how he lingered when he thought I wasn't looking, how his hand found mine without words. But I also sensed that Eli was holding something back, something he wasn't ready to say. One evening, as we sat on his balcony with a bottle of wine and the city sprawled out beneath us, I decided to break the silence. "Hey," I said, shifting closer. "Can I ask you something?" He looked up, eyes reflecting the streetlights. "Anything? What changed? What made you come back?" He sighed, staring off at the skyline. Honestly, I realized that running away from everything wasn't working. The job, the city, the distance, it was all just a band-aid. I was trying to escape the mess I thought love was, but the truth is, I was running from you. I felt the lump in my throat and reached out to brush a strand of hair from his face. I was scared too, scared that maybe we weren't enough. He smiled sadly. Maybe that's the thing about love. It scares the hell out of you. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that felt comfortable, full of unspoken understanding. Over the next few days, we started opening up more, sharing the parts of ourselves we'd kept locked away. Eli told me about the loneliness he felt overseas, the nights when he'd lie awake wondering if I was thinking about him too. I shared my own fears about being vulnerable, about being hurt again. One afternoon, we went to a small park nearby. The trees were just starting to turn gold, and the air had that crisp bite that makes you want to hold onto someone a little tighter. We sat on a bench, and Eli took my hand. "Do you think we can really do this? Not just survive, but actually build something?" I squeezed his hand back. "I think we have to try, because whatever this is, it's worth it." He looked at me then, really looked, like he was trying to memorize every detail. "When I first asked you if you believed in love, I was scared you'd say no. I laughed softly. And now? Now I think I'm starting to believe. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. That night, back at his place, we made it official, not with some grand gesture, but with a quiet promise over late-night coffee. "Let's not pretend we have it all figured out," Eli said, "but let's figure it out together." "Deal," I replied, feeling lighter than I had in months. Of course, life kept throwing challenges our way. There were misunderstandings, moments of doubt, and the ever-present fear that this fragile thing we'd built could shatter. But through it all, we kept coming back to each other. One night, after a fight sparked by something stupid, like whose turn it was to do the dishes, we sat on the floor of his apartment, exhausted and raw. "Why is this so hard?" Eli asked, voice breaking. "Because it's real," I said, "and real things matter." He nodded, pulling me into a tight hug. I don't want to give up. Neither do I. Months later, as we settled into a comfortable routine, I found myself thinking back to that day on the bus, the day Eli asked me if I believed in love. Who knew a random question from a stranger could change everything? We weren't perfect. Far from it. But we were ours. Messy, complicated, imperfect, and real. And maybe that's all love ever needs to be. It's funny how life circles back sometimes. Months after all the ups and downs, Eli and I found ourselves sitting on that same balcony where we had our "what changed" conversation. The city below buzzed quietly, lights twinkling like stars brought to earth, and for once, the noise didn't feel overwhelming. We didn't need to fill the silence. It was comfortable, like a shared secret. I reached out, and Eli's hand found mine without hesitation. There was a softness in his eyes that told me he wasn't just here in body, but fully present. Something that wasn't always easy for either of us. "I've been thinking," he said after a beat, voice low but steady, "about that question I asked you when we first met. Do you believe in love?" I smiled, remembering that unexpected moment on the bus. "Yeah? Well," he continued, "I think I do now. Not the fairy tale kind, but the real kind. The kind that's messy, complicated, and sometimes scary, but worth fighting for." I nodded because that's exactly how I felt. Love wasn't this perfect, shiny thing. It was the late-night talks, the fights that made us question everything, the moments of silence where we just held each other. It was choosing someone every day, even when it's hard. "We're not perfect," I said, squeezing his hand gently. "And that's okay. I don't want perfect. I want real." Eli smiled, this time without the hesitation or doubt that used to cloud his gaze. Me too. We leaned into each other then, not needing words, just the quiet comfort of knowing that we'd made it through the messy parts and were still standing. Together. Looking back, I realized that moment on the bus wasn't just a random encounter. It was the start of something unexpected, something that taught me that love isn't a question with a simple answer. It's a journey, sometimes uncertain, often challenging, but filled with moments that make it all worthwhile. And with Eli by my side, I'm ready to keep walking that path, messy and complicated as it may be. Because sometimes, the best kind of love is the one you never saw coming, but can't imagine living without.